The Brontë sisters, Charlotte, Emily, and Anne Brontë, were the daughters of an Anglican clergyman of Irish origin who had an important influence on their artistic inclinations. The Brontë sisters spent most of their life in isolation in a remote part of Yorkshire in northern England. They didn't receive a formal education apart from brief periods of school. They were mainly self-educated, reading widely from their father's library and drawing inspiration from the local public library or from periodicals. To express their intellectual creativity and their emotions, they began to write chronicles of imaginary countries, and in 1846 they published a volume of poetry, poems by Covell, Ellis, and Acton Bell. Like many female writers of the period, they decided to use pseudonyms. It was under these pen names that each of the sisters published their novels of the following year. Charlotte Carrot published Jane Eyre, Emily Ellis, Wuthering Heights, and Agnes Grey. Only Jane Eyre was immediately successful and was followed by other two novels by Charlotte, Shirley and Villette. The other two sisters soon died of consumption, Emily in 1848 and Anne in 1849. Charlotte married Reverend Arthur Bell Nichols in 1854 and died the following year, probably of an illness due to pregnancy. Jane is an orphan brought up at Gateshead by her cold and hostile aunt, Mrs. Fred. Jane is then sent to Lowood School, a very strict school, where she is not given enough food and clothing. When she grows up, she becomes a teacher there, but finally she decided to accept a job as a governess at Thornfield Hall, where she soon falls in love with Mr. Rochester, its owner. A stay at the hall is disturbed by strange noises and frightening events. After spending some time at Olmsted's Bath, Jane returns to Thornfield and Rochester proposes to her. She agrees to marry him, but 2 nights before the wedding she wakes up and sees a figure standing by her bed, and the wedding veil turns into 2 pieces. The wedding is interrupted by a stranger who declares that Rochester has already a wife, Bertha Mason, a madwoman he married in the West Indies and who lives in the attic of the house, looked after by Grace Ball. Rochester asks Jane to stay with him, but she leaves Thornfield and goes to live with her cousins at Moor House. There she meets St. John's Rivers, a religious man who plans to become a missionary and proposes to her. Jane refuses, and one night she hears Rochester's voice calling her. She returns to Thornfield Hall, but the house has been destroyed by a fire caused by Bertha, who ran through herself downstairs and died. Mr. Rochester lost his sight and a hand in the attempt to save his wife from the fire. He now lives in Ferdane, where Jane visits him and agrees to marry him. He finally recovers his sight when their first child is born. A woman's standpoint. From the day of its appearance, Jane Eyre has been credited with having added something new to the tradition of the English novel. The new quality is the voice of a woman who speaks with perfect frankness about herself. The novel described passionate love from a woman's standpoint in a way that shocked many readers. Women were expected to be presented with something of the unreality of romance. Above all, the heroine should be beautiful and rich. Jane Eyre is moderately plain, and this made her very real. Moreover, she falls in love with a man both rich and married to a midwife. Set in the early decades of the 19th century, the novel is structured around 5 separate locations, probably in the northern England. Each of this setting provides both indoor and outdoor spaces, the woods and marshes, Tonfi's garden and the moors for Jane to move through. So Jane can always move fluidly between nature and civilization and developed an inclination to cross boundaries. Every house or place represents a stage in her life, and as a symbolic name, Gateshead is where Jane spends her unhappiest moment but also reaches her ethical awakening with imprisonment in the Red Room. The name Gateshead stands for gateway. Low Wood means low wood, because the school was built in a low valley beside the wood, but also because it coincides with a low time in Jane's life. Barnfield is an allegorical name, a field of dolls, the place of mystery and temptation. Moor Hours is out on the moors, in the wilderness, the place where Jane tries to give a sense of do her life again. Farndine or Farnhill is the New Eden, where Jane finds major love. Each section of the novel represents a new phase in Jane's experience and development. The protagonist's character is developed very clearly. She's intense, imaginative, passionate, rebellious, independent, yet always looking for warmth and affection. Jane undergoes many struggles, such as the conflicts between spirit and flesh, duty and dishonor, denial and fulfillment. The novel also establishes the theme of the outsider, the free spirit fighting for recognition and self-respect in the face of rejection by a class-ridden and a money-oriented society. In Rochester, the old lustful villain is seen in a new perspective. He has the quality of a Byronic hero, but the stereotype seducer becomes a kind of lost nobleman of passion who is attracted to Jane's soul and personality, rather to her physical appearance. Jane Eyre is a Bildungsroman, a novel of growing up, so the theme of childhood and education plays an important role. Jane wants to be loved, not merely in a romantic sense, but as a human being deserving affection. As she grows up, Jane gains autonomy and economic independence and refuses a proposal of marriage twice, so as not to sacrifice her moral integrity. Marriage is presented as a relationship between equals, not as a social compromise. The most important theme is perhaps the analysis of the social position of a governess in a Victorian society. Jane is refined and has educated manners, however she treats like a servant. Charlotte Bradley criticized the strict Victorian social class system and gender relationships. If Jane had been a man, she might have attempted to improve her position. Being a woman in a social class, the only chance he had was working as a governess. The traditional Gothic convention is also used from childhood terrors to all those mysterious and threatening sights and sounds that reveal the presence of some malevolent force and that anticipate the tragedy at Thornfield. But Charlotte's symbolic use of the Gothic demands a more complicated response than his simple momentary intensity of feeling looked for by the early Gothic novelists. The use of the heroine as a narrator gives the unity to the novel. Everything is seen from the Jane's point of view, with whose experience the author has identified herself and invited the engagement of every reader. Jane often addresses the reader, explaining how she feels and makes decisions. The story is told in the first-person narrator. The language is straightforward and develops differently according to the style and mood of each character. This emotional use of language conveys the author's concern with the nature of human relationships. There are also repeated motifs, symbols and images, the workings of the supernatural, important dreams, pattern of light and dark, opposition of warmth and cold. Wuthering Heights. The novel revolves around two houses, Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange, respectively inhabited by the Earnshaws and the Lintons. At the beginning of the story, Mr. Lockwood, the new tenant of Thrushcross Grange, visits his landlord, Mr. Atcliffe, at Wuthering Heights, forced to stay the night because of a snowstorm. Mr. Lockwood has a strange dream about a girl, Catherine, who is tapping on the window, asking to be let in after 20 years of wandering on the moors. The next day, Mr. Lockwood returns to Thrushcross Grange and the housekeeper, Nellie Dean, tells him the whole story of the family from the Heights. Mr. Earnshaw, the father of Hindley and Catherine, one day came back from Liverpool with a foundling whom he called Hatcliffe. Hindley illustrated Hatcliffe well as Catherine got on very well with him. They roamed the moors together and promised they would stay together forever. One day Catherine was bitten by one of the Linton ducks and was forced to spend 5 weeks at Thrushcross Grange to recover, which gave her the opportunity to get to know Edgar and Isabella, as well as their quiet and refined way of life. So when a few years later Edgar proposed to her, she accepted. She told Nellie Dean she would not marry Heathcliff because he was socially inferior. Heathcliff overheard part of the conversation and disappeared to return only 3 years later, handsome, rich and determined to take his revenge. He won the possession of Wuthering Heights, gambling with Hindley, now a drunkard. Then he eloped with Edgar's sister, Isabella, married her, and treated her like a servant. Catherine fell ill and died, giving birth to a daughter, Cassie. Years later, Atcliffe kidnapped Pacey and obliged her to marry his weakly spoiled son, Linton. His revenge was thus complete since he became the owner of the Thrushcross Grange too. Nellie's narrative ends here. Mr. Lockwood leaves Yorkshire and comes back after a year to find out that both Linton and Atcliffe are dead, and Casey and Harrington, Hindley's son, are going to get married to live in peace and happiness. Nellie tells Lockwood that there are rumors in the neighborhood that the figures of a young man and woman have been seen wandering together in the moors. So it is not a end, but a new beginning. The novel is built around the contrast between the two houses on the Yorkshire moors, Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange. Wuthering Heights is severe and gloomy, firmly rooted in local tradition and custom. It is the appropriate background for the life of an unrestrained and primitive passion led by its owner, Atcliffe. Thrushcross Grange, the home of the Burgess Lintons, reflects their conception of life based on stability, kindness, and respectability. So the two mentions that stand for two opposite forces, the principle of storm and energy on the one hand, and a principle of calm and settled assurance on the other. Though opposed, they are complementary and ideally anti-unity. With the marriage between Hatton and Cassie, they will finally compose a harmony at the end of the novel, after consummation of Atcliffe's revenge and his death. The hero, Atcliffe, is described as a sort of Byronic hero, moved by irresistible passion, doomed to the despair of a solitary life, and finally tending to a total identity with his love, Catherine. Yet Atcliffe also appears as a Gothic villain in his inhuman treatment of his wife and even his son. Catherine is driven partly by social ambitions, which finally led to her to marry Edgar, but she's also prompt to violate social conventions. She embodies a wild and romantic nature. In the novel, basic human emotions such as love and hatred are presented in a state of purity and concentration. The spirit of romanticism and its concern with the human soul are still present in the correspondence between the violent passions of the characters and a wide natural landscape. That is an important thing, unlike other Victorian novels, where that is either a moment of forgiveness or the moment when all the conflicts are settled. In Wuthering Heights, that is not an end but a liberation of the spirit. The novel closes with vision of the graveyard, where Catherine and Heathcliff are buried, but the author is careful to say that they are sleeping, not that. The Gothic elements in the novel, such as the sinister atmosphere of Wuthering Heights, surrounded by the wilderness, Catherine's ghost, and the dreams, when superstition of the mansion are used not to frighten the reader, but to convey the struggle between the two opposite principles of love and hate, of order and chaos. The narrative mode is a system of Chinese boxes, a concentric system of narratives. There are two major narrators, male and female, outsider and insider. Mr. Lockfoot, the polite visitor from the city, is the outsider, apart from few occasions where, when he narrates what he sees, he simply writes down in the form of a journal what Nellie tells him. Nellie Jean is the second narrator, closely involved in the story and entirely reliable. Other characters occasionally narrate to Nellie. The narration does not proceed according to chronological time. It starts almost at the end of the story and develops a narrative within the narrative, including the use of flashbacks. This compact structure creates a sense of verisimilitude and, at the same time, a feeling of suspense. The continuous flowing of human life into the natural world creates moments of intense poetry and mysticism that are balanced by the concreteness and common sense of Nellie's language. Wuthering Heights represent a unique achievement in Victorian literature, often compared to a Shakespearean tragedy for its rendering of turbulent tension and natural crimes and cruelty. The novel marked a departure from the observation of a society towards the description of the individual personality and anticipated the novelist of the early 20th century in narrative technique. To the children of the first generation, the Moors offer refuge and delight. As children, Catherine and Heathcliff run wild across the spaces at once attractive and threatening. Nature and culture are in constant dialogue, and culture finally tames nature in the children of the second generation. The dualism of the novel founds itself in the own interaction of binary oppositions: rock trees, heaven and earth, Grange highs, storm and atmospheric tumult, which characterize the Moors, also represent the world of the unconscious mind. Landscape is personified and character assimilate to nature.